Good morning, it's Karen from Wild Woman Tarot here, and I thought I'd do a bit of an unusual kind of tarot reading today. I've been thinking about what's going on in the natural world. I mean, there's so much happening politically, but in the natural world, I'm particularly interested in that. Many of you who follow me on socials will be aware that I studied permaculture last year. So I've really been looking at the flow of energy, how we live in our own individual spaces, as well as on a larger level. And of course, part of that is looking at the weather and how our actions might be impacting on that. Now, this is not a new concept to probably anybody watching this, because we're all connected, but I thought it'd be really cool to do a reading and just ask some of these really challenging questions, you know. So I've written myself a couple of little notes and made myself a cup of coffee, and let's get into it, huh? Now, of course, there are many questions and different ways that we could coin those, I suppose, or pen them. I'm not quite sure how I would describe that. But there's lots of different ways we can ask a question. So I'm just going to go with one slant and, you know, we'll see what comes up. We might just flow with it. So I'm using the Golden Botticelli deck, and I've got my Druid Craft Tarot deck here as an add-on with the Tarot Oil Tarot deck just to my right, in case we need some clarification. So what I'm going to start off with, and I haven't planned this, we're just going to go with it. It's an early morning start for me, so, and it's beautiful outside. It's really hot, and I think we're in for a couple of hot days here. So good to get important things done first. So just spreading out my cards here. And I think what we'll do is we'll ask the question in terms of nature, whether we call it Mother Nature. Let's talk about the weather, perhaps. That's simpler for some people. Looking at the weather, where it is right now. Where we need to be. Need or want. Let's go with need. And our bridging card, so where we are right now with weather, we've got the King of Pentacles. Where we need to be is the Ten of Wands. You can see all that beautiful gold. That's interesting. And what's the action step? This third card is what's going to take us from where we are, King of Pentacles, to where we need to be. So just letting my intuition take me to the right card. And ooh, we've got the Ace of Pentacles. Wow. Okay. So let's talk about this just for a beginning. So where we are right now, the King of Pentacles is the businessman, really. And I guess we can see, for those of you who are news watchers or read the paper and look at all forms of information sharing, we know that it's big business that's running our world now. I mean, you look at these large companies pumping out oil, the gas that's going on, even I'm sure, now I'm not a political expert and I'm not trying to be one, but it doesn't take a degree in commerce to know that it's big business that's running the planet right now. And that's definitely shown by the King of Pentacles, because he's the top of the chain. It's all about the money. And that's really the card that's showing us what's there with the weather right now. So the weather is being driven by big business. That's my interpretation this morning anyway. Where we need to be, the Ten of Wands, is actually at the end of that, the end of that cycle. It is a cycle. And when you look at what has happened in our world, we look at, the peasants living off the land, and all the different stages that took us through industrialisation, all the way to where we are now. We are constantly using up resources, and we are living at a speed and at a rate that is actually, in many ways, killing us. Not just literally, but spiritually too. We're all on, and I know it's true myself, on that hamster wheel, just going to maintain, the mansion, shall we say. We've all got different size mansions, but we've all got them, whether it's, our fancy car or instead of our bicycle, and our feet. So where we need to be, 10 of Wands, which is at the end of that, and a point where we make a very new beginning. Because when you get this exhausted, there is only one way to go, and that is to start afresh, to let go of everything that's been weighing us down. Now, how do we do that? How do we do that? And the Ace of Pentacles card is the card that's given us a suggestion. Now, I don't know that you can see it in this vid because I'm a little far away from the camera, but at the very base of the card, there is a green landscape, a valley with some trees and some mountains. I hope you can just make that out. It's very subtle. And at the top, we've got the angelic realm. We've got these feminine angels, or fairies perhaps, and they are holding a golden coin, and they're holding it easily. And it's like, when I look at the expression on their faces, one's holding her hand up and she's helping the other one just hold that golden coin, that disc, which represents what we value. Now, in our culture today in the West, money and assets, things are how, and I'm generalising dramatically, are how we tend to determine our value and how we measure and place ourselves in the hierarchy of our society. But of course, you can't eat money and you can't drink it. So when things get, really real, that stuff's not that important. And of course, many people are driven by the power of love, the need to connect, family, community. There are many things that we all value. But what is the key? There's the big, big one for each of us in the world that we're living in at the moment. So our action step to get from a world where nature is driven by big business to the end of that cycle and a new beginning, it's about re-looking at what we value. And the Ace of Pentacles, and it's very easy to see in the traditional Rider-Waite deck, which I've got here. It's quite a beautiful deck, this one, very powerful. I don't know if I can find this quickly, but I'll have a little look while I'm still chatting to you, if you don't mind my eyes being away from you. Ah, here it is, beautiful, nice and simple. So this is the Smith-Waite, or Rider-Waite as it was originally called, version of the Ace of Pentacles card. And what we're seeing here is perhaps a more physical representation than this esoteric version of the imagery, which is probably what's happening in the heavens, you know. So our action to get to the beginning of a new cycle is to acknowledge all the wonderful things that we have in this world, but there is something higher. And we can see the gateway. See that beautiful gateway at the bottom of the garden? And there's an arch there. And there's gorgeous roses with their sweet fragrance growing over that. Now, the symbology here is quite magnificent because roses are really the most highly evolved plant that we have. The fragrance of a rose will actually bring our energy centers, or chakras if you want to call them that, into balance in the most profound way. And they bring us into our hearts. And it's at this heart level, this gateway chakra between the lower centers, which operate the personality. Through the heart, we move up into the higher centers, up into spirit. Yeah. And when we're in the love, when we are operating from this place of love, wow, it's just amazing. So, you know, I could wax lyrical on that. I've written about that a little bit in my book, Tarot and Aromatherapy. But what's important here is we must leave all, ultimately, not necessarily now, but ultimately, we must leave this beautiful garden that we live in, this gorgeous life where we have everything that we could possibly want or need. We need to go through the gate. And going through the gate is an initiation. There's a level of consciousness shift that's required so that we can allow ourselves to be drawn through that gate and up the pathway to the purple mountains in the distance. I don't know if you can see them through the gateway, but that higher calling, yeah. And it's the higher calling that takes us to that place where we recognize that everything that we're doing, the way that we're living our lives and running our society, not just in the West, but all over the world, is ending us, you know. So that's a really interesting combination of cards, I think. We've got, again, the King of Pentacles, our weather being run by business. Where we need to be is an ending of that, absolutely. And how is by acknowledging what we have, but moving up in our consciousness to a more spiritual, a more inspired, aware, conscious way of being. Now, why do we need to do this? I think anyone would know. You know, we're seeing radical storms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, wildfires, all of these natural events, and it is natural. The earth has always been doing this. The earth is always changing. There's nothing new there. But it's the catastrophic level that many of these events are moving to. And even here in Australia, we're seeing our fires are just getting more and more extreme. Now, there are scientific reasons for that. I have a brother who's a bit of a brainiac, and he has attempted to explain to me, you know, all the impact of the carbon and, you know, how that affects the rain and the creation of cloud and all that. To be honest with you, I can't grasp it all. But I can see it, as I'm sure you can, in our everyday, you know, what's happening. And yeah, so certainly some changes need to be made. And how do we do that? I mean, I guess the next question is, are we required to take some radical act? I know when during the lockdowns, I heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard about dolphins swimming into the canals in Venice because the waterways cleared. I'm sure that there are videos somewhere on Facebook where that can be seen. I can't recall now, that's a little while back in the past. You know, the smog went down in Hong Kong, those kinds of things. Do we need to change that radically and that quickly? Let's ask that question. Let's ask that question. So let's ask, could a radical shift in the way we live, a really dramatic, radical way we shift across the globe, change what we're seeing in nature? So we're talking about those storms, those tornadoes, those big floods, flood events and fires. So could a radical act, massive change across the globe, change that quickly? I think we need 2 cards to answer this question. 1, 2. So first up, we've got the World card. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a shift from one way of being into the other, because this particular card, it's the end and the beginning of the major arcana, those big soul cards, the big initiation cards. So that's perfect. So we know we're on point. And then we've got the Hermit card. And what I see here in this particular version of the Hermit, I see a man, he's naked under a wrap, so he's very vulnerable. And the Hermit initiation is a very, very profound one. It's where we move into a place of, I hate to say it, but of being alone, of coming to a place of truth. When we go into the Hermit energy, we come into ourselves. It's like we come into the cave, like we bring our consciousness back into our own body instead of being drawn out there in the world by all the sparkly things. And what this guy is doing is he's been reading a book. I don't know if you can see it there with all the glittery gold in the background. Pretty. And he's consulting this book of herbs and healing. And he's actually out in nature and he's communing with the plants. And I mean, it's the plant world that nurtures us. You know, that's where we get the majority of our food from. Whether you are a vegetarian, a carnivore, you know, the chain of food, it comes from this plant world. So to me, is a radical act required? I don't know that this is really answered definitively yes or no. I think it's about coming back to basics. So in that regard, yes, we do. But certainly there's education and looking at our food and how we do that. Is a radical act. We need another one. Yeah. It's radical, all right. Here we've got the Ace of Cups. We see the Madonna with the baby Jesus. Lots of, I mean, that's one interpretation anyway. But we see a mother with a child, a newborn. Profound love is what we see here. Pure, unconditional love. The sort of love where we would kill to protect what we love. So what is it that we have to kill? Yeah, we actually do need to be pretty radical, I think. We need to be pretty radical about the way we live. Get educated, get back to a simpler way of being, and start operating from a place of love, which is quite the opposite to what we see in business, where we're driven by the dollar. We need to be driven by our heart energy. I mean, there's a lot of questions around this where we could go, but just from a time perspective, it's given me something to think about. Yeah. So let's leave it there, and perhaps we'll come back to some other tricky questions and look and see what the tarot has to say about those on another day. Take care. Here's my little clicker. There it is.